Yeah, I can just.
Yeah, we can look at it. I thought we would be able to talk about this society.
What do you want to know?
You have to say something.
So what is the question?
So this is the panel that has, no, there's no question, but it's the panel on health as a flow.
I know, but I just want to watch the news.
Oh, I see. Okay,
So
there
I
you
know,
go.
yeah, go ahead.
It's true.
You kind of watch that.
Just yeah. I'm now going to try and make it on the live one so that everybody can see it, because Edom just gave me these changes now. So
sorry, just the message from the Secretary General from the Commonwealth.
yes, she after the first panel, the message from the Commonwealth Secretary General comes after. After the second panel. That's right. After the second panel and before teachers. Yes, that's right. That's right. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to try and do a quick translation into that other document for everyone to have time to write. But I feel more comfortable now on my side. Can we do an audio check for the live streaming? Sure. Okay, so. So yeah, it's coming through. They're just asking if you can. You want me to just? Okay. Yeah. The handout. Just checking that on the live stream you can hear the audio okay coming through from the handheld microphone.
Can hear when.
Okay, I'm also checking with the Africa.com team to make sure you can hear us on your live stream feed. Perfect. Thank you very much, Deborah.
All good. Cool.
Okay, last thing that we need to check is the slides. So I've tried to put all the slides, including the videos, into one deck, into one PowerPoint presentation. That's probably the simplest, right?
Sorry?
That's the simplest, right? Just so that we go through, like the first slide, it's just
confusion in the panel when I said I wasn't coming. They took me out, and now that I'm here, they just put me in. All good, all good. It's just oversubscribed. There's about room for 100 people, and then 300 who have signed up saying they want to come, including people like Priya Agarwal, and everyone's writing to me saying, how can I get it? No, this is the Accra reset with all the presidents. We have all the presidents here, so everyone wants to come because the presidents are here. I am running a panel. No, I'm moderating a panel. It's 2:30. 2:30 the meeting starts. 2:30 to 4. Yeah. No, so exhausted now. I got up there because I got up early. Yesterday I caught up, but today I caught the train early morning, all the way from Zurich here. And then since then I've been sitting in one, I don't have a room right here. So I'm sitting here and there. And even then a lot of people have come up and I have a chance just to catch up with people. So all good, all good, all good. You? No, but I booked my ticket. Right now I'm going. And I haven't had a chance to talk to Mahama yet. So his flight is late and it's all, like everything always happens. He's coming, but he's coming half hour later. I was hoping he'd have been here half hour earlier so I could get to him on all this. But Helen's here running around like a chicken with her head.
Could I ask you for a huge favor? Could you take a picture of me over here?
Yeah, we'll do.
Sorry, I'm trying to take a picture. Thank you. Appreciate it. All right.
Yeah, your phone is already there.
Oh,
Mine is much less.
please can you try?
I sent it.
Oh, you can
No,
use
I'll
your
send it to you.
Oh, yeah.
But also, this guy's shadow came in. Here he closed your eyes, but this one
The
is
third
really,
one is good.
really good. Look at this.
Oh, that's really nice. That's
You
really
crop that and have this sent it to you. So,
Jeez.
do this. Right, is it a...
Yeah.
Okay. So just say share. And then I will send you the...
Okay.
Yeah?
Yeah. Thank you. In fact, if we do it again, it would actually airdrop them.
No.
Yes. And you just go airdrop. And then. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, I'm
Got
going
it?
to move from here.
You'll have to crop it.
I will. Thanks, Naveen. Thank you.
Yeah, but it's just that his shadow...
Yeah, it was like.
But it came out well.
Yeah. Thanks.
I'm guessing it's until the event starts, yeah. 23, 7, yeah, must be. Yeah, must be.
Okay. As long as it's not
Doesn't
time
explode.
to close the session.
Yeah. Is it okay for now I mute the room on Zoom?
Yeah.
Yeah.
okay?
Yes, okay.
Let me try in the next few minutes and.
Yes, sure.
Yeah, it will enough time. What time is your train?
4:30.
Whoa.
It's tight.
Why don't you leave the station?
I think I'm towards the end.
Yeah, I know. But there is a little bit after yours also. So yours will probably come around 4 o'clock.
Yeah.
And do you have a car?
No, I have to grab my bag and then I have to the car. I think will just get me stuck in a jam.
So it's a
at the
4:30
station.
train
This one, the third one is the.
Zurich.
Zurich. So you're going to change
Yes, this one.
To land.
And the last one is the lady.
Well, I think the latest time there is a 5. There is a
Yeah,
5
there's a
o'clock
5
one.
o'clock usually.
Just before 5, 4:56 or something. Yeah, land.
I just, I required the first one.
Yeah,
Recording in progress.
So I just say this, I know Mohammed Fakim.
Oh, yes, yes. Brilliant. And as you supported him a lot as well. And he deserves it. And they need to move. That's what he brought us. This is the first thing.
Good afternoon, Ambassador Sharif. Can you hear me? Would like to test your audio.
Yes, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yes, I can hear you very well, loud and clear.
Can we test your video as well?
Yes, please.
I cannot see you. Can you see me?
I can see you and hear you go.
A very good afternoon to all of you. My name is Adam. I'm just trying to call the room to order. We are slightly behind schedule for a number of reasons, but we are committed to sticking within the allotted time, so we're going to breeze through this. We thank you again for making the time. There's still a queue outside. We're going to allow our VIPs to enter, and once they do, because we have a huge overflow, we're going to give the preference to the speakers and the speakers and the VIPs, because the speakers are all VIPs as well. And then when we see some VIPs come in the room that need help, we'll count on the younger ones to yield to the older ones so that they can have a seat, and the sense is that there are some who leave earlier, and so as they leave, we create room and then we keep adding on. So thank you very much. This is typical Davos, so we expect, it's almost like the UNGA. So once again, thank you very much, welcome, and I'm just going to signal my colleagues and then we'll start. We'll get started. Thank you.
distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, if we could kindly ask us to kindly please take our seats. We're going to start with our proceedings in the next minute. Thank you very much for your kind attention. If you're still upstanding, if I might invite you to kindly please take your seats. Thank you very much. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Accra Reset. This is the Davos Convening. My name is NGOZI Poshabalala, and it's an absolute privilege to be serving you as your moderator and co-facilitator this afternoon. I have one very quick announcement to make, and perhaps two. The first of these being just a quick apology for the late start. We're going to try to the best of our ability to make up for the time as much as possible. And then secondly, to bring to your attention the translation devices, the channels, to ensure that we are having a conversation that is as inclusive as possible. We do have Arabic on channel 1, English on channel 2, and French in channel 3. Without further ado, I am going to invite our beloved Dr. Edem. I think he's a familiar face to all of us in the room, and he's going to do a few things right at the top. One of these is to acknowledge our excellencies and our dignitaries and to thank them for their presence, but also to give us a frame, to remind us what is the Accra Reset and why does this conversation matter now more than ever before. Can I ask just for a warm round of applause for him, please?
Thank you very much, Nozi, and once again, a very warm welcome to a rather very chilly Davos on a lovely afternoon today to this very special convening called the Accra Reset Davos Convening. My portion is just basically to set a little context whilst welcoming you again, knowing how much some of you had to change schedules. I know there are those who are catching flights later today. They've had to push schedules and try to synchronize it to make it work. We're thankful and exceedingly grateful. Accra Research journey began in August. Or before that, when at the beginning of this year, the continent of Africa and the larger global south was plagued with a lot of funding cuts, cuts in ODA assistance, among others. Well, the signs were already there that this was not a sustainable way to go. And it was in the margins of the spring meetings in Washington, led by a minister from Nigeria for finance, where a conversation about this is the moment we've been looking for. Are we going to continue to complain, or we're going to start thinking about how we can think of making our contribution to this multilateral system that everybody we've heard about, there has to be a change in the financial architecture, there has to be. So we know this had some gains. It's made a lot of tremendous gains, but there are still challenges and gaps. And so in August, President Mahama convened a meeting in Accra, starting with health, because health is the most dependent on global aid, and is the one that is also affected by the funding cuts, the most affected by the FAT cuts. Health became that entry point of seeing what is possible when sovereignty is brought into the discussion, where countries can build their own capacity for execution. That meeting led to a resounding consensus that if we do not reset the entire development model, because there are global dynamics that impact upon global domestic realities. And if we don't reset that, we continue to plan and do all kinds of programming and be able to build all kinds of alliances and coalitions, but the scaling will always be an issue, and also integrating into global will be an issue. And so at the UN General Assembly in Accra this year, President Mahama, along with other global leaders, launched the Accra Reset Initiative. The initiative's goal is to rethink, remodel, and come up with new ideas after 60 years of reflection from the Global South, knowing that we cannot continue to depend on loans and aid, to look at what model can we also propose as prototypes for reforming and also creating an alternative to this ailing existing global order as far as development is concerned. So I'm happy to have people in the room who are luminaries from the likes of AMFI, the Alliance of African Multinational institutions whose president is here as well. We'll be acknowledging others, but as dignitaries can, because others have been delayed, and our special host, President Mahama himself, is running a bit late because of weather issues. He just landed, and he landed in Zurich earlier due to weather issues, but he's going to be here in a moment. We're going to sort of rejig the program around a little bit to start with some of the panel discussions, and then when he joins, we'll invite the welcome speeches or the opening remarks, and others will continue. So with that, I'm going to hand you over back to Nozifo. I will quickly just acknowledge in our midst His Excellency Vice President, former Vice President of Nigeria, Professor Yemi Osibanjo, who you'll be hearing from a little later. We also have the Prime Minister of Papua New Guinea, James Markey, in the room, His Excellency. We have, of course, I mentioned the Minister of Finance Nigeria, the Minister of Trade, DRC. We have His Excellency Dr. Tedros also in the room. And I'll be acknowledging others as we go. We have a lot more people joining us online on stream, and a lot more waiting in queue to try and get in the room, which is already over. We have capacity constraints. But now I'll bring Nozifo back, and then I'll come back to introduce others as we move along. Thank you very much, and welcome once again.
Thank you very much, Dr. Edem. One of the people who is online and is standing by to give us his contributions is the President of Egypt. So we will get to that shortly. But first, we're going to cue a very short video that really sets the scene and builds on some of the words that Dr. Edem has just shared. It is called Defining the Sovereign Future.
We are living through a moment of profound transition. Old certainties are fading. New forces are reshaping how power, capital, and opportunity move across the world. We are confronting something bigger than change. It is a test of being itself, being one planet, being one species, being one essence. For decades, development cooperation promised progress through consensus, development finance, and global goodwill. Yet too often, the results have been fragmentation without scale, financing without execution, and alignment without delivery. The gap between ambition and impact has been stretched to breaking point. Across much of the global south, progress has been constrained by a destabilizing structural condition, a condition of triple dependency: dependence on fragmented aid, marginalization from value, technology, and decision-making. Think it is just a failure of ideas? Think again. It is a breakdown of the will to action, the long fatigue of deliberation paralysis. The missing variable has never been ambition. It has been sovereignty understood deeply, beyond posturing, steeped in practice. The practical capacity, the national urgency to negotiate, to coordinate, to finance, and to implement at scale. Sovereignty as a discipline of delivery. This is the premise of the Accra Reset, a head-of-state-anchored initiative to retool how development cooperation works in a post-dependency world. Some trust in treaties, some in platforms. We, the acolytes and champions of the Reset agenda, believe in a deeper essence. To rebuild the very operating logic of global cooperation, a new branding spirit. At its core is a simple idea. Progress happens when countries act together at the right scale, at the opportune moments, and with the right balance of incentives. The Accra Reset advances sovereign prosperity spheres through this operating logic. Minimally viable geo-economic platforms where nations coordinate policy, investment, and execution to unlock production, jobs, and shared growth. From stagnation to prosperity, from fragmentation to scale, and thus, from possibility to transformation. A new branding spirit indeed. But strategy alone is not enough. That is why the Accra Reset is launching a new North-South dialogues, revisiting the Brandline inquiry of old. A focused plurilateral process where Global South and Global North partners move beyond statements to concrete joint action, real projects, real timelines, real accountability about issues that go to the heart of the development order itself. And yes, health is not a side issue. It is the clearest test of whether sovereignty is real. Health systems expose our capacity to govern complexity, to mobilize capital, and to protect lives while building industries. Health is a wedge, the bellwether, the radar. That is why today, on the margins of Davos, we are launching a high-level panel to re-architect global health governance. Healthy populations will fund the opportunities we have outlined in the Belvedere Principles on Sovereign Prosperity Spheres. From artificial intelligence to critical minerals. Think digital public infrastructure. In fact, consider a global digital skills passport. Think tangible progress refined through communities of practice and policy exchanges, with southern pace setters like India, Singapore, Indonesia, and South Korea, all secured by the strengthening of sovereign negotiation capacity. The question before us is no longer whether transformation is needed. The question is whether we are prepared to organize for it, to move from aspiration to execution, from dependency to dignity, from potential to power. This is the Accra Reset. The work begins now.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. While we are ready to commence with our first panel, I think it would be amiss to not take the moment to acknowledge our excellencies who have joined. And so, Dr. Edem, might I give you the podium once more, briefly, to extend those acknowledgements and to also let you know that I think the panelists are ready as soon as you are.
Thank you very much. I have the distinguished privilege and honor to introduce His Excellency, the Vice President of Nigeria, who has joined us, Shetima, Excellency. And as much as possible, we want this to be a conversation, so we're trying to avoid a lot of protocol, and we are so honored that we have distinguished leaders in our midst who appreciate this. We have also His Excellency President Obasanjo, who is our patron and also the chairman of a member of the Guardian Council of the Accra Reset Initiative. Of course, he needs to introduce the former President of Nigeria, the Federal Republic of Nigeria, President Obasanjo. I've already introduced the Prime Minister of Kenya. Thank you. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Edem. We're going to proceed now with our very first panel. And as we rework the program in the flow, we will, of course, be making our way back to hear from our excellencies. This conversation is centered on the question of capital, corridors, and sovereign investment platforms. It's my pleasure to welcome my panelists. If they might kindly please join me on stage. Allow me to welcome the CEO of the Africa Finance Corporation, Samela Zubaru, President and CEO. Thank you very much, sir. Can we give him a big round of applause? I know that Dr. Haytham El-Mayagri, the Executive Vice President from Afro-Exim Bank, is with us. Thank you very much, Dr. Haytham, for your time. The Honorable Prime Minister from Papua New Guinea. Thank you, Your Excellency, the Honorable James Marape. Let's give him a big round of applause. And unless my eyes are failing me, I have not yet spotted the Honorable Stella Ndabeni-Abrams, who is the Minister of Small Business Development in South Africa. Honorable Minister, if I've missed you, please, she is still stuck outside. So I'm going to continue with the conversation and maybe get assistance of getting the Honorable Minister in the room to join us. Thank you very much. Maybe let me start with the Africa Finance Corporation, if I can, please, sir. One of the things as we listen to this video that speaks to us about the future of sovereignty and the different levers, the big conversation on the continent, of course, has been about pooling capital into corridors, investable corridors, and ensuring that that is one of the ways in which we show up in that action-based sovereignty. The question to you, sir, is what do you think the AFC can do that commercial banks cannot, that will accelerate meaningfully the investment into corridors, but more than anything else, into sovereign investment platforms more broadly?
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. All protocols duly observed. I want to say a few words. I'll get to your question because I think it's important to set the context. So we've always known about African potential and African opportunity. The challenge has always been, how are we executing on that potential? And interestingly, you need both skills and finance to execute. Skills, somehow you can pay for. Finance, a bit more difficult to get. We all know that the cost of finance in Africa is also very high. And it's high because the finance comes mainly from outside Africa. Yeah. So we have always believed that there must be African agency, and that as Africans, we must take ownership of our development, and we must be intentionally funding our development. And for us to know what is the capacity to do that, we did several research to determine what's the capital that we really have on the continent. And we found that we have $4 trillion of domestic capital pools on the continent. And I want us to all reflect on that, because most of what we seek from outside is a fraction of this. So within our local banks or our African banks, we have $2.5 trillion. Now, banks are heavily regulated, so their capital is not really available for development, like you've asked. But we have 500 billion with African pension funds. We have 300 billion with African insurance firms. We have 180 billion with African sovereign funds. And we have over 200 billion with public development banks like ourselves. So there's over $1 trillion that can be mobilized and motivated to finance Africa's development. What we need to be doing now is to accept that we're not capital scarce. We're capital trapped. We need to be looking at how do we ensure capital flows from where it is now to where we need it the most. So I will give an example of what has happened in Nigeria. So several years ago, the Nigerian government did pension reforms, and they allowed for private sector managers to pool funds together and manage them. It put in place a regulatory program to determine how these managers would manage the funds. And part of what they did was to understand that you must make provision for the future of the worker and their children. Yeah. It can't be that the worker works all his life, he saves, and then his children have no jobs. So you must be intentionally building the future for the savers. So they came up with a program whereby 5% of whatever is managed can be invested in infrastructure private equity, 15% in infrastructure bonds, 5% in venture capital private equity. Why? Because Africans are creative, but you must have a mechanism for them, for their creativity to be funded. So if there was no venture capital, there would be no Microsoft, there would be no Google, there would be no Snapchat. All the things that we're used to today were inventions. And there was a mechanism for funds to go through that, which is why that has been created. So this example in Nigeria should be replicated across the continent.
Right.
Because I think it's only in Nigeria that we have this. In other places, they have what we call alternatives, and it needs to be better defined. So in essence, if we have 10%, or I'm not going to talk about 20, let's say 10% of 500 billion, that's 50 billion. If we have 50 billion to fund infrastructure across the continent, we know what that will deliver. So the African Union has a plan, or the NEPAD, they have a list of priority projects. All of that can be funded with this. So what we need to do is to do the work for the regulatory reforms, do the work for the risk innovation and intermediation that needs to ensure that funds flow. More importantly, we should also have more serious, focused conversations about our future. Yeah. So this conversation that we're having today here, we should have it in Lagos, we should have it in Accra, we should have it in Nairobi, we should have it in Johannesburg. We should have our leaders, maybe not all of them because they're also busy, maybe 7, 10, 12 of them, come together and work with us to define a future that we can all fund, because we can do it. Yeah. We just need to determine our priorities and ensure that we do it.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that contribution. I want to build on what you've shared, because I think the phrase that we're not capital scarce, Dr. Haytham, we're capital trapped, is an important one for us to engage with. And so the question to you is that when you look at organizations like Exim Bank, what role do you see to help us box out of the trap that has been highlighted here, so that we really are able to pool funds more meaningfully, and we're able to really back these sovereign investment platforms? What is it that's going to be different that we need to do, whether we're doing it in Johannesburg or Lagos or Nairobi?
Okay, so let me draw on what the reset means and see how our role should be. We should not think now projects within borders, we should think of corridors, regional coordination, Pan-Africa. We should also not look at transactions. Transactions are always forgotten and swallowed and finished. We should look at platform to finance. And the whole idea is that Exim Bank need to, and other multilaterals, need to become more of a Pan-African structure and also become a balance sheet anchorer. Pan-African structure meaning that we need to start to pull together projects that actually have multi-country, that have more value added to our raw material, but also that is waved nicely in logistics and payments and the AFC, FTA, because once you structure it well, you finish one half of the exercise because you start to attract the capital. Sure. The second part is become an anchor to balance sheet. This is where you start to take risk. You start to show the world that we're putting balance sheet together with other multilateral. You start to put de-risking, so on, and then you start to define it into Pan-African fund that you can attract diaspora to put their money on. They can attract the global funds to put their money on, and even pension funds. The whole idea is that you need to create a sustainable structure that is irreversible. Right now we do transaction by transaction, project by project, and unless we create this, we also create a couple of Pan-Africa projects, like what is the optimal logistics for Africa to thrive and trade? What is the optimal structure for Africa to have an energy infrastructure so that people, and package this in funds that we globally invest. Let's not forget that we have India and China that also 1.3 billion like us, but they have one blueprint that they're growing with. We have 50 plus blueprints. And unless we start as multilateral have a role to create a blueprint, we'll always miss on people who want a cohesive plan to fund.
So Mr. Zuberi has given us the scope of the challenge and the opportunity at hand. What I've heard you say, Dr. Haytham, is giving us the levers that are available for us to pull, one of those being the courage to actually look at elevating some of the structures to a continental level, but also anchoring the balance sheets. If all of that happened, we still have to deal with the playing field, which to a large extent is shaped by policy and the regulatory environment. And this is where I come to you now, Prime Minister. But before I do that, I did see that my minister did walk in. So I'm going to evacuate your seat, Honourable Minister, and I'm going to ask you to please kindly join us, the Honourable Minister of Small Business Development in South Africa, Stella Ndabeni. Thank you very much. So, Honourable Marape, if we have such a huge and clear understanding of the size and the nature of the challenge. We know the levers that we need to pull, the big, courageous actions that will really signal a reset. In your view, what would count as a visible win as early as the end of 2026 that says this reset is in motion and indeed backing sovereign investment platforms is the way to go?
Well, my sister, firstly, thank you for giving me an opportunity to be at the panel and up in the front. I want to firstly say I feel less qualified to offer this advice to my sisters and brothers at the great continent of Africa. But in any case, you've given me the opportunity. And I want to firstly say, Africa should not look doom and gloom. You have some of the brightest, you have some of the most experienced hands in planet, and I look at one sitting right in front of me, the Director General of WHO. I want to acknowledge his presence in the room. Dr. Tedros, thank you for your interventions during the pandemic worldwide, and thank you for helping Papua New Guinea. Thank you. Papua New Guinea, by the way, we stuck in the middle of the ocean in the Pacific. 3 years back, Dr. Ruto, President of Kenya, looked across the room and saw me at President Xi Jinping's hall in Beijing, and he said, "Where do you come from?" I said, "Pacific." "And how comes you look like me?" And I said, "We left the continent many, many years ago."
Yes.
In fact, we've been in PNG over 10,000 years. UNESCO did establish a World Heritage Site in the practice of agriculture in Papua New Guinea mountains 10,000 years ago. So we live in the Pacific. I have not much experience to offer to all of you in Africa. But if you ask me this one question, what do you gain or you must do in 2026? For me, speaking from government perspective, is absolute policy clarity. Absolute policy clarity. I've been Prime Minister 6.5 years now, and I'm accused of the policy non-clarity on what I'm trying to pronounce to my investors and to those who want to have a stake in PNG. So if something you ask me that I must do for PNG, or rather the African continent does for itself, is absolute policy clarity. On foreign direct investment, on the benefit sharing within as you earn money from these investments. Africa is home to the largest pool of natural resources. You're 1.5 billion people, 60% of that are under 25 age. This is enormous energy. Properly channeled, Africa is the growth combustion engine room going forward into the future that can match the Asian growth that is coming up. So I want to say one thing that must come out of these conversations. The entire continent, absolute policy clarity on foreign direct investment, the residuals on how you trap the wealth and distribute to your people, translating the youth into non-engagements, into SME-based engagements, and I'm happy you have a SME minister up at the panel, and getting that 60% of the youth, that's 900 million people of the 1.5 billion you have in the continent. So you have enormous potential. You shouldn't worry if someone pulls back aid. I think aid dependency has held us all back. We should be stepping out, harnessing from our own resources, having laws and regulations. In PNG right now, my policy is the government gets 55% of every natural resource harvest in my country. I sat down on operating mine. Mr. Mark Bristow, the continent had run the Pogra gold mine in my country. I sat it down, renegotiated, we reopened the mine. PNG government now owns 51%, and the investors own 49%. Preserving investors' return on investment, key in the policy aspiration. So policy clarity is important. You gain the upside from your resource, the investors win, and the residual as you earn from these resources, put back investing the youths for their progress. In my view, if you ask me what you must do in 2026, absolute policy clarity. That must be intergenerational, not just one generational, not based on the cycle of politics.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. Policy clarity is the clarion call you're giving us. And again, you link back to the point from Mr. Zuberi where he was talking about ensuring that we are looking at generational impact as we think about the reset and what this means in terms of where we invest and how we invest. Minister Ndabeni Abrams, as I give you the final word as we begin to wrap up this panel, I think it's quite fitting that we move from the big clarion call from Dr. Haytham, who says, let's elevate and think about institutions at a continental level. We hear from Mr. Zuberu about how do we unlock domestic funds so that we can also self-fund our own ambition. And then the Prime Minister says, let's get the investment environment right in terms of getting policy clarity. How do we do all of that and not leave small business behind and not leave young people behind in this equation?
Thank you so much, and good afternoon, all your excellencies and all the guests that are here. Let me first apologize for arriving late. Security is a nightmare outside. We had to stand outside. It's not because I'm undermining the session. But one important point that I arrived as the Prime Minister was explaining on policy clarity, that I think we need to do beyond the clarity of the policy, is Africa learning to speak with one voice and not indicate left and turn right.
Got you.
Because we know all the problems in Africa. We know what we have in terms of the resources that we have. We all know that. We know what we are not doing, but there's nobody who's interested in changing how we are doing things. All the things that we are saying that must be done in Africa, the skilling, the investment within the continent, we speak about those in all the platforms, but there's no will to invest in that. And I think for as long as we are not really confronting that, VP, we're not gonna go anywhere. We've got to say, all these resources, what do they do to benefit our people and continent? And to do that, it means this clarity that we're talking about must really be informed by the people of Africa, working with people who may have experience in what they can bring as collaboration to Africa, not it being imposed to Africa. Because Africans, they know what needs to be done. But as I said, it is the will to do that we're lacking. Of course, we understand the dynamics that we're faced with, which is why I agree with the Prime Minister to say, be clear on what you want on the FDI. It shouldn't be the money first, and then the rest follows. The money must follow what we want to do. Skills are there in Africa, we know that. I mean, like you can go to Silicon Valley, you can go everywhere. If you look at the Africans in the diaspora, they are driving the artificial intelligence. It's not other people that are driving that. In different sectors, in the services sector, if you're talking about engineers and all of those, it is Africans that are doing that. But we're not keeping them at home. We're not incentivizing Africans to invest the energy and capabilities that they have at home. It talks to the different interpretations of what we need to do, because as South Africa want to do what favors South Africans, Nigeria wants to do what Nigerians want. We forget that we can be stronger if we are working together. So for me, it's about that integration of thought, integration in action, and therefore we be able to leverage on the banks that we have and the non-banking institutions to say, what is it that works for Africa? Don't bring, I, amongst other things, I am responsible for financing small businesses. And if you look at the conditions that are set by the financing institutions, they don't talk to the ground. And this is what we must understand. What is it that the people of South Africa understand, or Africa? And therefore, all the instruments must follow that.
Thank you very much.
Once more for joining you late.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I think everybody can agree in the room that we could continue in this conversation. There are so many nuances that we could bring to the surface. The program doesn't allow us. But what we have been gifted in this very short and brief conversation is a reminder that the capability sits within the continent. The funds are there. We're not capital scarce. We're capital trapped. We've got the know-how to box out of that. We've got the policy intention to have more clarity. And we do have an instinct to really invest in the next generation through small and medium-sized enterprises, making sure that the impact is multi-generational. Might I ask for a big round of applause to my panelists, please? Thank you very much. As we build the program and rejig it in the flow, I'm going to ask you to bear with me. If you see my eyes darting to the back, I keep looking for signals from my colleagues to see if we're still on track. Where I'd like to go now is to call on Mr. Santiago Wills from the World Trade Organization. He has with him a message from the Director General of the WTO that he wishes to share with us in just a few minutes, not more than 2 to 3 minutes. Thank you very much. Let's welcome Mr. Wills, please.
Well, good afternoon, Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. It is an honor for me to be joining such a distinguished group of leaders on behalf of Dr. NGOZI OKONJO-IWEALA, Director General of the World Trade Organization, who deeply regrets not being able to join us, but sends her sentiments of gratitude and support. Excellencies, we meet at a moment when the global trading system is under intense strain. From conflict and climate shocks, from pressures on supply chains, and from a growing risk of fragmentation. These pressures are not abstract. They're already shaping investment decisions, development prospects, and the daily cost of living for millions of people. And against this backdrop, calls for a global reset are both understandable and necessary. But let me be clear, a reset does not mean abandoning openness, nor does it mean discarding the disciplines that have underpinned decades of growth. A meaningful reset is about rebuilding trust, updating rules, and ensuring that trade keeps delivering for people around the world. From a WTO perspective, the diagnosis is sobering, but not hopeless. We're seeing a steady rise in fragmentation risks, from trade restrictive measures to narratives of decoupling and bloc-based economic organization. Our analysis shows that a world divided into competing blocs would leave everyone worse off, with particularly severe costs for developing and least developed countries. At the same time, despite the trade policy disruptions of the past year, the evidence is that supply chains have been resilient, that they are rewiring in response to new pressures, and that they remain central to the global economy. The task before us, therefore, is not to reverse globalization, but to rethink it. What we need is re-globalization, a form of integration that spreads gains more fairly, reduces systemic vulnerabilities, and reflects today's realities, from digital trade to climate risk to geopolitical uncertainty. To do this, multilateralism itself must evolve. We need reforms that make cooperation more responsible, more flexible, and more capable of delivering concrete results. This is where the ideas emerging for the Accra Reset initiative resonate strongly with the trade realities we confront. The notion, for instance, of sovereignty as execution is particularly relevant. In today's global economy, sovereignty cannot be reduced to isolation. That path is ultimately self-defeating. Isolation makes us vulnerable and diminishes nations' scope for action. True economic sovereignty lies in the capacity to build competitive value chains, to negotiate effectively, and to access markets on fair and predictable terms. Similarly, the idea of regional prosperity spheres speaks to a real need, anchoring development in geography, connectivity, and shared interests. But such spheres can only succeed if they're rules-anchored, supported by trade facilitation, predictable corridors, interoperable standards, and resilient logistics. So what does this mean in practical terms? We have no shortage of global fora for statements and declarations. What we lack are enough platforms for disciplined delivery. This is why plurilateral, results-oriented cooperation is becoming indispensable, not as a substitute for multilateralism, but as a pragmatic complement to it. A focused North-South dialogue building on efforts already underway could make a real difference, especially if it concentrates on shared priorities for both hemispheres: skills mobility frameworks, critical minerals value optimization, industrial applications of artificial intelligence, and health technologies. These are areas where cooperation is not only possible, but mutually beneficial. In closing, let me stress the following. We do need a reset, including the kind being championed by leaders such as President Mahama, President Tshisekedi, President Abdel, Fattah, El-Sisi, President William Ruto, and others. But it must be a reset that protects openness while rebuilding legitimacy, one that embraces cooperation while respecting sovereignty, and one that turns shared intent into measurable outcomes. We need it urgently so that trade can keep being an engine of prosperity rather than a fault line of division. Thank you, distinguished ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Santiago. Thank you very much, Mr. Wills, for bringing in the voice of the Director General of the WTO. But more than that, thank you for then bringing in the North-South element to this conversation as we now transition into another short, concise panel that will, I'm seeing that we're not going to go into the panel.
So we will go into the panel. It's just that we'll have to sort of realign the program because there are some of our speakers who may have to leave earlier for other engagements. And so what I will suggest now is if, because we have Egypt waiting, and I think those programs can be clustered around when the president gets here because they're speaking to the same topic. So why don't we take another statement, a video from the Commonwealth. we take those 2 videos, and then what I'll do is invite His Excellency Tedros and Vice President of Nigeria to have a conversation very quickly because they have to leave for other meetings, and then we'll invite Baba when I understand the president is almost here, so then we can.
It's okay, I can stay.
Oh, you can stay a little longer, but you're on a panel with the president who has to leave. Okay, so we'll work it out. But first, let's take a video from the Secretary General of the Commonwealth. Thank you.
Excellencies, distinguished leaders, colleagues, friends, the Commonwealth has survived by learning early a difficult lesson, that history cannot be undone, but it can be redesigned. Ours is one of the few global families where North and South, and in between, has nearly perfected the art of consensus building around its values. For decades, we have come together across a shared table, bound by history, language, traditions, law, trade, migration, and increasingly a common vulnerability to a world that no longer works for industrialized or developing countries alike, and where the prospects for the majority of people diminish year by year. We are determined to course correct, from business as usual to a transformative plan to build democratic resilience, economic resilience, and climate resilience, with a focus on our youth and women through skills learning and entrepreneurship, as well as innovative financing. That is why we sense kinship with Accra Reset. We are proof that it can work. You are proof that we can be much more. There is no doubt that the traditional development cooperation no longer responds to the need for high impact, resilient solutions that improve lives and safeguard our planet. Too many declarations, too few delivery machines, too many well-intentioned frameworks that never become bankable programs, investable corridors, or novel sovereign capabilities. And in recent months, the disruptions in global health and development financing have made the risk plain. Unless we recreate the global order, resilience building will become a slogan only. The Commonwealth knows this terrain intimately. We have spent years helping countries move from ambition to action. When we advance the Commonwealth connectivity agenda, we focus on making trade, investment, and regulatory cooperation more navigable for smaller and larger economies alike. When we deploy long-term advisors through the Commonwealth Climate Finance Access Hub, we are helping governments unlock real finance, strengthen institutions, and build pipelines of fundable projects. And when the Commonwealth Blue Charter turns high-level ocean commitments into action groups led by member champions, we are demonstrating something the world urgently needs again, that multilateralism can be engineered to deliver. This is the bridge the Accra Reset is now building. The Accra Reset asks simple questions, demanding answers. Can we design a new compact of cooperation that respects sovereignty, that mobilizes private capital at scale, and converts political will into programs with measurable results? Can we build prosperity spheres in places that the world has long described only in the grammar of crisis, from the Great Lakes to the Sahel and beyond? Can we treat skills mobility, critical minerals value optimization, and productive sovereign technology, including digital public infrastructure, as the shared architecture of a less fragile world order? Can we weld communities of practice for a new cadre of sovereign negotiators fit to close mega deals that transform our countries? The Commonwealth is ready to be a practical partner in this work. We embrace your North-South dialogues in the spirit of recreating shared prosperity and ending global economic disparities. We embrace the new Bandung spirit, in the policy exchanges you are designing with pace-setting global South countries. We are with you through and through. We are ready for far more than symbolic endorsement. We are set for peer learning, for project incubation, for trade and investment cooperation, for institutional strengthening, and for the steady diplomacy that turns bold ideas into credible coalitions. Let Davos not be another summit of eloquence. Let it be a springboard for execution. And let the Accra reset be remembered not only for what it diagnosed, but for what it built. I thank you.
I think it can get a round of applause, even though it is a video. I see the hesitant hands. Thank you very much. Such clarity in terms of how do we move increasingly towards execution and action, that is the real test, away from the diagnosis to the actual doing. We turn our focus now to a video message that we've received from His Excellency Félix Tshisekedi Tshilombo, for the President of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. From there, we will then go into a short presidential engagement, and then we're going to come back and go into our North-South conversation. President El-Sisi is also on standby, so we're going to try our best to navigate the space. But for now, team, if we could please go to the video from His Excellency Tshisekedi, please.
Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs les chefs d'État et de gouvernement, distingués participants, Mesdames et Messieurs, c'est un honneur de m'adresser à vous en ma qualité de membre du Conseil présidentiel inaugural de l'Accra Reset à l'occasion de cette réunion de Davos placée sous une conviction simple mais exigeante: la souveraineté n'est pas un slogan. En effet, elle se prouve, elle se construit, elle se livre par l'action et par les résultats. Pour la République démocratique du Congo et pour l'ensemble de la région des Grands Lacs, cette souveraineté d'exécution commence par une vérité que nous devons désormais rendre pleinement investissable: la paix et l'harmonie ne se consolident pas par des déclarations seules. Elles se consolident par la production, par l'emploi, par des chaînes de valeur régionales crédibles et par une prospérité effectivement partagée. C'est précisément le sens de la sphère de prospérité souveraine. Une plateforme géoéconomique minimale viable dans laquelle des États voisins coordonnent leurs politiques publiques, leurs investissements et leurs standards afin de libérer les chaînes de valeur transfrontalières, d'intégrer les marchés régionaux et d'augmenter la résilience collective dans un environnement mondial devenu plus complexe. Dans cet esprit, la sphère de prospérité des Grands Lacs constitue une démonstration très concrète de ce que la souveraineté, lorsqu'elle est exercée de manière collaborative, peut produire. Plus de stabilité, plus d'opportunités mondiales et davantage de prospérité à long terme dans une région où nos destins sont interconnectés. En 2025, la République démocratique du Congo et ses voisins ont engagé une nouvelle phase de coopération pratique, un cadre d'intégration économique régionale visant à formaliser les chaînes d'approvisionnement en minerais, à renforcer la coopération transfrontalière et à libérer le potentiel économique de notre région grâce à un véritable dividende de stabilisation. Nous nous réjouissons en outre de la pleine convergence entre cette dynamique et la vision du bassin du Nil portée par mon frère, son Excellence le président Abdel Fattah El-Sisi, président de la République arabe unie d'Égypte. Je veux vous l'assurer, chers amis, en signant ce document, nous n'avons pas cédé à l'effet d'annonce. Nous avons posé un acte de conviction et de méthode. Ceux qui imaginaient que ces pactes n'étaient que des instruments de communication destinés à capter l'attention des grandes puissances constatent déjà qu'ils ont manqué l'essentiel. Car ce qui se dessine dans les Grands Lacs n'est ni un récit fabriqué, ni une promesse abstraite. C'est une trajectoire de bascule, de l'exploitation sans transformation vers la production à valeur ajoutée, de la fragmentation vers la coordination, de la concurrence stérile vers la consolidation régionale des intérêts, des incitations, des stratégies et des capacités. Notre ambition ne se limite pas à mieux exporter. Elle consiste à mieux produire, à mieux transformer, à mieux intégrer et par conséquent à mieux négocier notre place dans l'économie mondiale. Je voudrais à cet égard partager 4 engagements structurants au cœur de l'expérience et du leadership de la République démocratique du Congo dans cette sphère de prospérité. Le premier engagement, c'est passer de la dotation en ressources aux plateformes industrielles. La région des Grands Lacs est au cœur de chaînes d'approvisionnement mondiales. Le prochain chapitre doit être celui d'un basculement, de la logique des volumes à la logique de la valeur, de l'extraction vers la transformation, de l'opacité vers la traçabilité, de l'enclave vers l'écosystème industriel. Nous savons où se crée la valeur. Nous savons aussi quel type de gouvernance et d'incitation peut ancrer cette valeur ici, durablement, dans nos territoires. Deuxième engagement, construire des chaînes de valeur régionales adossées à des corridors, à des zones économiques spéciales et à des investissements coordonnés. Nos efforts, notamment avec la Zambie, pour développer une chaîne de valeur intégrée dans les batteries et soutenir des approches transfrontalières en matière de zones économiques spéciales, indiquent la direction à suivre. L'Afrique ne gagnera pas en restant fragmentée. Nous devons harmoniser, mutualiser, standardiser, afin d'élever nos chaînes de valeur, attirer l'investissement productif et créer des emplois qualifiés. Le troisième engagement, c'est faire de la mobilité des compétences et du transfert technologique une priorité de souveraineté. Il n'y aura pas d'industrialisation sans capital humain, sans ingénieurs, sans techniciens, sans chaîne de sous-traitance locale compétitive. Notre sphère de prospérité doit donc accélérer la circulation régionale des compétences, la reconnaissance des qualifications, les programmes conjoints de formation et l'adoption de technologies industrielles modernes comme l'automatisation, maintenance prédictive, la digitalisation des processus, la traçabilité et la certification. C'est ainsi que nous transformerons nos ressources en industrie et nos industries en prospérité partagée. Enfin, le quatrième engagement consiste à étendre la logique des corridors au-delà des minerais vers les biens publics industriels. L'Accra Reset a raison. La santé, par exemple, n'est pas seulement une obligation sociale, c'est un pilier d'industrie, de résilience et de sécurité humaine. Nous voulons promouvoir des investissements dans la production régionale de produits et technologies de santé essentiels, une gouvernance renforcée des achats et une agrégation de la demande afin de rendre la production viable à grande échelle au-delà des frontières. Mesdames et messieurs, le message de la République démocratique du Congo aux partenaires et aux investisseurs est direct. Nous recherchons des partenariats constructifs, négociés, transparents et orientés vers des résultats mesurables. Des partenariats où le capital de long terme s'aligne sur l'amélioration de la gouvernance, la coordination régionale et la montée en capacité productive. Si nous réussissons, nous ne changerons pas seulement la trajectoire des Grands Lacs. Nous proposerons au monde un modèle devenu rare et pourtant indispensable, une sphère de prospérité où la souveraineté ne s'énonce pas, elle s'exécute, où l'intégration n'efface pas les nations, elle les renforce, et où l'histoire ne condamne pas, elle libère. Telle est notre voie, et je vous invite à vous joindre à nous, non pour commenter notre ambition, mais pour contribuer à la réaliser par des projets, par des investissements, par des transferts de technologies et par des partenariats justes. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much. So that was a message from President Tshisekedi on how Congo in the Great Lakes region is looking at basically rolling out its prosperity sphere. We'll have the chance to also listen to Egypt, who is leading the Nile Basin discussion on prosperity spheres. But what I want to do at this point is to splice the program a little bit and rearrange it. We okay? Okay, so there's an aspect of the program that has to do with global health and development, which is really what the reset is about. But since former His Excellency Professor Yemi Osibanjo has to take leave, we'll take the development part, and then we'll come back to Dr. Tedros for the health part later when we are talking about the health architecture. So may I invite His Excellency just to give us just brief 3 minutes on given what you heard about the prosperity spheres, and I know I'm putting you on the spot because it was supposed to be a panel discussion, given what you've heard also about, you know, not just the prosperity spheres, but also what you're leading, the initiative you're leading also globally about also reimagining the whole global development architecture. Give us your parting words on how you think this can sort of fuse well with what Accra Reset is doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everyone. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I actually thought this would be a panel discussion, so I thought I'd be able to hide behind the questions, but it appears that I don't have that opportunity anymore. Okay.
No, I didn't say no. I would stay. That's what I said. But okay, I just knew that here because we're bad, so I don't mind. Yeah, we're saved. Okay, please. Yeah. So please, I'll just sit in. Okay. We should put the president in the sense that vice president. Good. That's good. Okay, so we've fused health and development back together. So why don't I give, since Dr. Tedros, why don't you start with, no, I'll start with Professor Osibanjo. You're leading an initiative currently on resetting global development as well. And of course, we can't have duplication of too many such like initiatives. So how do you see this fusing with the reset?
Okay, so just very quickly. So this initiative is about how to reimagine development cooperation in the wake of defunding and the tumbling of ODA. And the whole idea is to find ways of rethinking how to fund development here and there. I think one of the major problems that we need to, of course, deal with is healthcare, how to fund health. And if we ask ourselves what has worked, I think that's probably a good place to start. And for me, one of those things that has worked very well is really the multilateral platforms, the Gavis, the Global Funds, the PEPFARs, and all of that. Those have worked very well indeed. And they have worked partly because they deal with some of the governance issues that you have to deal with when funding healthcare. They are measurable. The results are measurable. It is cheaper per dollar, or depending on the currency you use, to fund, for example, malaria, HIV/AIDS, and several of the other types of serious situations that we found ourselves in. So these platforms have worked very well. And they also answer the question, how do you collaborate? How do you work together? Because collaboration is going to be key, and I think we heard the Honourable Minister speak about that. We have to speak with one voice. And one of the things that these platforms have done is to aggregate people, to cause civil society, governments, private sector to work together. Second thing that has worked, of course, are the multilateral institutions, and they have delivered. And if you look at some of the funding, the WHO, of course, is a good example. But if you look at the African institutions, for instance, we heard about the AFDB, we heard of the AFC, Afro-Exim, etc. They have actually worked, they've delivered. The problem, of course, is with efficiency. And sometimes, you find that some of these institutions are not as efficient in terms of delivery as they ought to. But we can deal with that. The most important thing is that going forward, in the absence of aid, we're not going to have the luxury of ODA. So we need to work with those institutions. We need to work with our DFIs. And already there are indications that these institutions can actually work. I mean, look at, just listening to what Samaila was saying about what the AFC is trying to do. I mean, there are huge amounts of money sitting in funds in Africa that are not invested. Some of them are invested in US treasuries, and some of them are invested elsewhere. But these funds can be made available locally. There are funds, Euro bonds, and all of those kinds of bonds that are at the moment not being traded, but they can be traded. They need to be de-risked to be traded. So funding is possible. And I think a lot of it will come down to our ability to sit down and think through these things and achieve the results. I think that sometimes we spend a lot of money, a lot of time thinking through the issues, but the actual implementation, getting stuff done, is where we get stuck.
Dr. Tedros, we don't want to spend too much time thinking through the issues. You've started your own reforms of this global order as far as health is concerned. So what are your thoughts on the direction we need to be going? And also looking at, again, a lot of competing aspects of people looking at the same thing through the same angle. How can all of these things be fused together to create the kind of impact that we want to see?
Yeah, thank you. Maybe following up on Vice President's comment, and especially related to the funding cuts, there is a projection recently made by IHME. I hope you know the International Health Metrics, the institute. They projected that for the first time in 25 years, in 2025, under 5 mortality globally, the average global could actually increase. We had this decline for 25 years, but now it could increase in 2025. Of course, this projection is about 2025. We cannot do anything about 2025. But I think we can do something about 2026. And then with the funding cuts, I'm really encouraged to see and happy many of our leaders saying it could be an opportunity to change for good. And His Excellency Prime Minister Marape was saying it could, we're held back. What held us is, dependency. And many leaders are realizing that exactly the same. And that's a mindset issue. And when there is a mindset shift, I think that's the start of a big change. And many leaders share your opinion, Your Excellency. So although there is this bad news, I also see the good news, because saying there is opportunity to change, to bring qualitative change. So I think this is very important. And the other thing that's now coming as a discussion in the circle of many of our leaders is Africa loses $88 billion in illicit financing, while it gets between 55 to 74 billion in donations. So the money, just take the illicit financing, the money is already, the illicit financing money is already higher than what Africa gets from donation. So not only there is the mindset shift, but there is also the practical understanding of how this problem can be solved. But not only that, many leaders are now saying we need to mobilize domestic resources. One is the illicit financing, taking care of that, but we can mobilize domestic resources, and now many countries are working with us to find immediate solutions and also long-term solutions. The immediate solutions are taxes. And many countries, including Ghana, are now moving. Alcohol, tobacco, sugary drinks, tax on that could generate a lot of money. By the way, I was listening to the finance minister of Zimbabwe, and he was presenting in one of the sessions the measures they're taking, and it's really amazing. I know about Nigeria as well, and other countries, by the way. Many are taking already action, the immediate, the short term. But at the same time, they're designing, many countries, the long-term solution. For instance, public health insurance to generate revenues using social health insurance systems and community-based health insurance systems. Because in order to address the current problem in ODA decline, the combination of the short term and the long term is very, very important. And we're trying to support. So these are the two issues, the short term, long term. But this is all at country level. Then the second very important thing is, we're not saying donation will stop, but that donation should be used in a way that empowers the country. And whatever happens at the country level, it should be based on the priorities of the country. And the country should have the say. And the good thing, one other positive thing I see from the donation, they're saying co-investment, from charity to co-investment, is the funding flow should respect the principle of one policy, one plan, one budget, one report, and the country being in the driver's seat. So the reason I'm raising this is countries, donors should have also a mindset change to accept this and not do anything that duplicates or replaces the country's programs. And I see positive development in that, and I hope more and more countries will adhere to that principle. Okay. Then the last, sorry, you want to take it?
Since you're going to come back when we get to the health, but no, you can finish your last point.
So the last point is the mindset change at country level, and the mindset from partners will be important. It's a combination of the two. And then the one in the middle is strengthening continental institutions, also very, very important. We're supporting Africa CDC, we're supporting Africa Medicines Agency, and its own continental institutions will also be important and should be part of the change agenda that's now happening, the reset agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. So Dr. Tedros is going to take a short leave of us, and he's going to come back when the President gives his closing remarks. So we'll now thank you so much, Dr. Tedros. We'll thank Professor Obasanjo for giving us this time, because I know you have to leave. And we want a round of applause for them, and we will keep the conversation going. But what we'll take from this one is that the sovereignty capacity that is required to execute on sovereignty exists in what we're doing in development and also health as well. Thank you very much. I now have the honor to invite His Excellency, the Vice President of Nigeria. We can't be talking about sovereignty spheres in Africa and not have Nigeria at the center of that discussion. So we talked about the Great Lakes, we talked about the Nile Basin. I think we should have a Niger Basin. prosperity sphere. So we'd like to invite the Vice President of Nigeria, His Excellency Shetima, to say brief remarks. We've crumbled his panel, and now he's going to give his remarks. Since he also has to do.
Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, and of course, the elder statesman under whose tutelage we were radicalized when growing up in the 70s and the 80s, have now been turned into a conservative capitalist, an elder statesman, a global statesman. We meet again under the banner of dialogue. Yet Kando requires this. The dialogue of the last century, organized around aid, charity, and managed dependency, has reached its analytical limits. What confronts us now is not a discrete development problem, but a shared condition of systemic stress, demographic aging in parts of the North, debt and inflation pressures across the South, climate volatility, and a global order whose institutions are struggling to match today's risk with credible collective action. To our brothers from the global North, I am here to tell you the solution to our labor crisis, and it is the solution to our developmental crisis. For decades, the narrative of African youth was one of risk, a youth bulge to be managed. Today, I present it as your greatest strategic reserve. With a median age of 18, Nigeria is not just a nation. We are the workforce of the world. Projected to be the third most populous nation on earth by 2050. And by the end of the century, when all of us here have become poor tenants in the home of the earthworms, Nigeria will be the most populous nation on earth. The Accra Reset, Your Excellency, you are very much welcome, which was launched at the UN General Assembly last year, demands a shift from poverty reduction to wealth creation for Nigeria and for Africa. This means redefining migration. We have heard the concerns of the global North about immigration pressure, and we have also heard our citizens' desire for global opportunity. The answer is not physical migration, which drains our nations of talents and strains your social fabrics. The answer is digital service export. India last year generated over $100 billion from global outsourcing alone. Nigeria, the oil giant of Africa, the highest we have ever earned from the process of oil was $35 billion in 2011 under former President Goodluck Ebele Jonathan. And according to Convening, a global finance outfit, there will be 65 million global talent deficits by 2035. The United States, Russia, and Brazil will each suffer from 6 million talent deficits. And as I said earlier, the median age of Nigeria and even of Ghana is not more than 18. And there are more English speakers in Nigeria than in India. And our proximity to Europe is an added advantage. So, Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, this digital service export provides a vista of opportunity, a win-win situation for all of us. And this is not aspirational, it is operational. We are building a sovereign prosperity sphere, while a software engineer in Yaba, Lagos, creates values for a prime in Berlin or Silicon Valley without ever leaving Yaba. We have the National Talent Export Program, NATEP. We have created a structured pipeline to train and certify Nigerian talent for the global market. Our 3 million technical talent initiative is currently training the largest cohort of developers, data scientists, and AI specialists in African history. And the Etana Digital Pre-Zone in Lagos provides a physical and virtual campus for this remote workforce to operate seamlessly. We are not asking for aid. We are Africans. We have learned to carry our poverty with dignity. We are offering you a high-quality, cost-efficient and scalable extension of your own workforce, as well as investment to continually develop such workforce. And I can imagine the question in every CEO's mind here: can we trust the infrastructure? Can we trust the data? As a government, we understand that trust is the new currency. That is why the Tinubu administration did not invest just in skills. We invest in digital security and standards. We have domesticated the highest standards of data privacy through our Data Protection Act, aligned with the AFCFTA protocol on digital trade, ensuring that your IP is protected by treaty, not just by policy. On cyber resilience, we have treated cybersecurity not as an IT issue, but as a national security imperative, establishing a robust framework that secures the digital handshake between our nations. And when it comes to regulatory harmony, when you hire a Nigerian team, you are not hiring in a Wild West. You are hiring from a WHO maturity level equivalent regulatory environment for digital services. The sovereign prosperity sphere is a negotiated partnership. Therefore, I come to Davos with two specific propositions for leaders of the Fortune 500 companies that are seated here. And I call on you to form a joint architecture, join our NATEP Corporate Council, partner with us to define the curriculum, tell us exactly what skills you need, cybersecurity, AI ethics, development operations, and we'll build the training pipeline to match your specifications. And secondly, make the commitment. Impact investing is good, but impact sourcing is better. I challenge the global 500 companies represented here to commit to sourcing 10% of their remote technical workforce from the Accra research nations by 2030. This is a win-win we promise for decades, but fail to deliver. You get the talent you desperately need to innovate. We get the dignified jobs we need to stabilize. Together, we turn the digital divide into a digital bridge. The bridge is built. It is secure. It is open for business. It is time to cross it. The president of Ghana will give you the handshake to cross that bridge. The elder statesman here is here to support us. Thank you so much, and God bless us.
Shall we give another round of applause to the Vice President and extend handshakes to him as he's invited the President to also extend the handshake to the bridge that will help us cross this divide. So even this program has to be reset in the spirit of reset. So we're going to go back to the original idea we had, given that we are blessed and privileged now to have His Excellency the President of Ghana with us. And so in that spirit of reset, I'd now like to invite His Excellency Chief Olusegun Obasanjo to give his opening remarks that he was supposed to have given an hour ago. So Baba, would like to welcome, in your capacity as a member of the Guardians of Accra Reset. And after that, the President will come. We'll take leave of those who have to leave us. But we should thank them again for holding the fort. Professor Yemi, His Excellency the Vice President, thank you very much. Thank you.
Please be seated. Your Excellency, the President of the Republic of Ghana, and my dear brother, Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Adam said what I'm giving is opening remark. I think this program is gone probably 3/4 of the way. So what I'm giving is mid-course remark. What I would like to say is that, or to begin with, I'm particularly delighted that Accra research is being understood for what it's meant to be. And when I speak today, I speak as a member of the Guardian Circle of the Accra research. We have come to Davos to do what must be done in a moment like this. And the moment like this has been said by the panel that came when I first came in, that I listened to, by the panel of the former Vice President of Nigeria and Dr. Tedros, the DG of WHO, by the Vice President of Nigeria, and to name reality clearly, to define a practical direction, and to call serious people to serious work of new resource architecture, including investment for sustainable and sustained development and growth. That is what Accra Research is all about. All-inclusive development. We are living through a new age of disruption, uncertainty, and unpredictability. The world is reorganizing, borders matters again. At one time, say, borders are just line of demarcation, but they do not become anything to restrict movement. They are becoming restriction of movement. Supply chains are being redrawn. Security and economics are fused. And at the same time, the old development architecture is struggling, wobbling, and unreliable. Aid systems are under fiscal stress and are dwindling, if not disappearing. Institutions are pulled by competition, and mandates. Trust is weakening. Coordination is harder. In such moments, countries that are not organized for negotiation and execution do not merely fall behind. They become bargaining chips, and at best, and footsteps are the worst. That is why the Accra Reset has come to be, to inspire leaders to stop complaining about the system that has changed or is changing, and to build a way through it. Across much of Global South, we see a similar distressing pattern. And as the Prime Minister said during the panel discussion, clarity of policies, that we don't often see. vulnerability to the geopolitics of others, dependence on financing that comes with fragmentation, volatility, and weak domestic accountability. Marginalization from value and technology, even when the inputs come from our soil and the labor comes from our people. My brother, President John Mahama, has called it a triple dependency. I agree. And it produces a dangerous habit. It trains nations to negotiate from fear, to plan from scarcity, and to implement under permanent interruption, and now with disruption added. So let us be clear. Sovereignty is not a flag that we have gone to come here and wave about. Sovereignty is discipline. It is the ability to make choices and carry them through. It is the ability to negotiate firmly, coordinate regionally, mobilize capital, incentivize resources, and implement at scale that leads to sustainable development and growth. If you cannot execute, you cannot be sovereign. If you cannot coordinate, you will be divided. If you cannot negotiate, you will be prized, packaged, and positioned by others. No one cares that we are tired of this. Everyone waits to see if we will lift up and get going. No bird builds a nest with the full foliage. Every wise bird starts with twigs and then knits them. We are announcing clear test beds and exemplary programs and projects, starting turbines to give us thrust and lift. For example, we set health as a clear test of sovereignty. So we intend to embed it in the North-South dialogue to negotiate with our friends and development partners in the North about certain critical reforms as well as concrete projects to boost access to health facilities and technology. We are also talking about critical minerals, sovereign artificial intelligence models that can be packaged in public-private partnerships for projects that mean more to us in our parts of the world than they do to global technology giants. To these must be added mobilization of resources internally. And during the panel discussion, I think this was very clearly brought about. And also incentivize resources from outside. We are talking about grooming, empowering, and badging a new cadre of sovereign strategists and negotiators to enter these dialogues and others on our behalf, whilst ensuring that their blades remain sharp through communities of practice and peer learning. And we, asking our friends in Singapore, India, Brazil, Indonesia, South Korea, to name just a few, to join us in policy exchanges to take these undertakings forward collectively, grandly, hugely, and passionately. Today, President John Mahama of Ghana will set out the programmatic strategy of the Accra reset. He will also launch the search for members of our distinguished college that will flesh out these various proposals being presented here, whilst laying out the motivation and roadmap for the inaugural high-level panel and its linkage to the North-South dialogue process. Let me end with a simple statement. The future will not be given to the unprepared. It will be negotiated. It will be built. And it will belong to those who prepare, unite, and organize for it. Thank you. I will now yield the floor to my brother and friend, President John Mahama. Your Excellency, you have the floor. Let me collect my...
Thank you very much, President Obasanjo. We popularly call him Baba. We're most grateful for that mid-session remark, as you yourself called it. Your Excellencies and my distinguished colleagues, friends, and partners in global transformation, let me begin by thanking the World Economic Forum for creating the space for this session, and to our various strategic partners, not least the African Development Bank, the Global Fund, Afro Champions, Georgetown University, and the Rockefeller Foundation for stepping forward at a moment when the world's health and development systems are being tested by disruption, conflict, and a new atmosphere of intellectual retreat. Of course, my appreciation goes to the Guardian Circle of the Accra Reset, of which President Olusegun Obasanjo is one, and it's led by him, the Alliance for African Multilateral Financial Institutions, and the Confederation of Indian Industry. This afternoon, I stand before you as an African leader born in the heady days of post-independence Africa. Growing up, I could feel the excitement of my parents and their generation about the possibilities of our newly won freedom and the right to manage our own affairs. My country, Ghana, will celebrate its 70th anniversary of independence from colonial rule in March next year. In the relatively short span of 7 decades, we've been through a lot. We've seen coups d'etats and periods of democratic governance. We've lived through the Cold War, witnessed the fall of the Berlin Wall, We're excited about the advent of globalization, and we came together as a global family to work on the MDGs, the SDGs, and climate change. Today, as I address you here in Davos, one thing is clear. Our world as we know it is at an inflection point. The global multilateral governance system, universally agreed and accepted after the Second World War, is breaking down. Bilateral relations among nations are increasingly becoming transactional, and many state and non-state actors are acting unilaterally in pursuing their own national and parochial interests. Africa has lagged behind in the past decades following liberation from colonial rule and has been trapped in cycles of conflict and multidimensional poverty. Africa has thrived on handouts and humanitarian assistance from the developed world. While no specific name has yet been coined for the new global system that will emerge, Africa intends to be at the table in determining what that new global order will look like. Africa must pull itself up by its own bootstraps. Global humanitarian assistance is shrinking, and many developed countries, including Europe, are compelled to cut overseas development assistance and increase defense spending by the new reality of an unpredictable ally across the Atlantic. The COVID experience was a wake-up call. Africa was the last continent to begin receiving vaccines amid a global pandemic. But for the immunological profile and resilience of our African population, many millions would have died in that pandemic. And that is why I'm grateful, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, that you made time to be a part of this afternoon's Davos convening of the Accra Reset Initiative on the sidelines of the World Economic Forum. Just last September at the UN General Assembly, I introduced the Accra Reset Initiative, not as another declaration, not as a wish list, but as a practical answer to a question millions of young Africans are asking: what should Africa's response be in a changing global order? Today in Ghana, we're answering that question. We're resetting our country. We're cutting waste, we're restoring hope, and we're building systems that work. In my first year of being back in office, we've shown that democracy works, and that change is possible when leadership is focused and accountable to the people. From a debt-distressed, crisis-ridden economy, we've achieved an impressive turnaround with a stable macroeconomy characterized by single-digit inflation, a strengthened currency, and increased business confidence. But here's what keeps me up at night. Ghana's success alone is not enough. However admirable Ghana's turnaround story is, we cannot be a jewel in the dirt. We must work together as Africa. We must knit together the patchwork of success stories. And that is why we're here in Davos today, to take what's working across many countries in Africa and the Global South and scale it up across other countries, to move from resetting one country to resetting the entire development model for the Global South. And let me be direct about what we're up against. Too many of our countries are caught in what I call the triple dependency. We depend on others for our security choices. We depend on donors for our health and educational systems. We supply the world's critical minerals but capture almost none of its value. This isn't sovereignty, it's a trap, and it's getting worse. In my quiet moments, as I try to find solutions, here's what I've learned. Crisis creates clarity. The clarity is this, that we must build our own capacity to act. There's precedent for what I'm proposing. 20 years ago, UN Secretary General Kofi Annan and several courageous world leaders, including President Obasanjo here, made a simple, powerful case. HIV/AIDS was ravaging millions in Africa, and a global response was required. This courage created the architecture of the Global Fund, which saved millions of lives in Africa and across the world. That fight succeeded because leaders decided to act together with urgency and without excuse. Today, I'm not so sure. The US is gutting funding to the United Nations system and other global organizations that have saved millions of lives. And we face an unpredictable world. And this is why Africa must be responsible for its destiny. Today, we face a different pandemic, the pandemic of unfulfilled potential. Millions of young people have no jobs, health systems that collapse at the first crisis, economies that extract our resources but build nothing long-lasting. If we could mobilize the world to fight a disease, why can't we mobilize to fight poverty, to fight dependency, to fight the systems that keep brilliant young Africans locked out of the future? In Ghana, we're proving something important, that execution beats excuses. We're cutting government spending and have reduced the size of government to a record low of 58 ministers, including deputy ministers and regional ministers. We're digitizing services to end corruption. We're training young people for the jobs of tomorrow. We have renegotiated our debt so we can invest in our people and not just service loans. This is the Resetting Ghana agenda, and it's working because we stopped talking about the transformation and we started building that transformation. Now imagine this same approach across Africa and the entire global south. The multilateral order and rules-based system may be under threat, but we can forge a new coalition of the willing based on a shared vision and mutual respect for each other. What if we pooled our negotiating power on critical minerals so we capture value and not just extract raw ore? What if we exercise more sovereignty over our natural resources to create prosperity for our own people? What if we build regional manufacturing hubs that create millions of jobs for our young people? What if we produced our own vaccines and our own medicines with our own technology? This is the Accra Reset vision. It's not a talk shop. It's not a declaration. It's a practical blueprint for how countries can work together to build real sovereignty, the kind that you can measure in jobs created, in children at school, children vaccinated, and young people thriving. My fellow leaders, let me speak plainly. In this fast-changing world, we're entering an era where countries must compete, innovate, and build or be left behind. Our young people are watching, they're brilliant, they're hungry, and they're running out of patience. So here's what we must focus on. First, we must invest in skills, not just education, but skills that match real jobs in the real economy. Digital skills, green energy skills, manufacturing skills. We need a generation of young Africans who can build and not just consume. Second, we must build together. No African country can industrialize alone by itself. We must create regional prosperity platforms, manufacturing zones, energy grids, and digital infrastructure that gives our businesses scale and our workers opportunity. Third, we must negotiate as one. When we bargain separately, we're weak. When we negotiate together on minerals, trade, and climate finance, we can be formidable. Unity should not be just a slogan, it must be our strategy. Fourth, we must produce at home, from vaccines to semiconductors to solar panels. If we don't make it, we'll always be dependent on someone who does. Industrial policy isn't old-fashioned. It is what will make us survive. And fifth, and most importantly, we must hold ourselves accountable to our people. We cannot ask the world to invest in us if we tolerate corruption, waste, and systems that don't work. Reset means reform, and reform means results. And so the Davos commitment. Friends, we didn't come here to ask for charity. We came to propose a global partnership of the willing, based on a shared vision and mutual respect for each other. The Accra Reset is building the architecture for a new kind of cooperation, one where global South countries don't just receive programs, but co-design them with our partners in the global North, where we don't just attract investment, but shape it around what are our priorities. We want to create prosperity fears across regional platforms where countries coordinate on investments, infrastructure, and jobs. President Obasanjo often reminds me that leadership is about legacy. And he asks me, what will you leave behind? My answer is simple. We want to leave a continent where young people don't risk their lives crossing the Mediterranean because they will have opportunities at home. We want to leave systems that work, industries that thrive, and nations that stand tall. And in this, Ghana cannot do it alone. Africa can't do it alone. There's a call to every leader in this room. If you believe in a world where prosperity is shared, not just based on narrow interests, then join us. If you believe the Global South deserves partnership and not pity, join us. If you believe the next chapter of human progress is going to be written in Accra, Nairobi, Kigali, Abuja, and Cairo, then join us. The Accra Reset is not seeking permission, we're building momentum. From New York last September to this room in Davos and to the African Union in Addis Ababa next month, and soon at the Oslo Dialogues, we shall continue to build these partnerships. And so the question is not whether the world needs this, the question is whether we have the courage to build it. I thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I believe we could give His Excellency a warmer round of applause for that address. Thank you. As promised, ladies and gentlemen, what we've been hearing throughout the time together is that health is perhaps one of the surest ways in which we can really stress test our sovereignty. And so we transition now into a conversation that allows us to double click on the strength of our health systems and how they can be not only an early warning system, but really a signal that indicates whether our sovereignty is at risk of fragility or not. We're going to kick off with some opening remarks from Peter Sands. He's the Executive Director from the Global Fund. And then we're going to go from Peter into a very tight fireside chat with Dr. Sanya Nishta, the CEO of Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, sitting alongside Madame Priya Basu, the Executive Head of the Pandemic Fund at the World Bank. We're going to then begin to wrap that session up with some brief remarks from the Senior Vice President of the Rockefeller Foundation, who looks after the health initiative, and that is Naveen Rao. And knowing that one of our panels was reconfigured, we're going to invite the Right Honourable Helen Clark to kindly please join us to extend some of her remarks into that conversation as well. For now, though, might I please welcome Dr. Peter Sands to please join us.
Thank you, and knowing the time, I'll be brief. Your Excellencies, it's both a privilege and actually humbling to be following President Mahama, President Obasanjo, to speak at this stage. My message actually can be boiled down to one thing, which is that the Global Fund has been a partner to Africa in tackling health problems for now 24 years. We are really excited about the Accra Reset. We see this as an inflection point, a point which will reshape the partnership, but one in which we will continue to partner countries in Africa as you accelerate your path to sovereignty. From the beginning, the Global Fund model has been country-led. Countries and communities define priorities, make the investment choices, drive delivery. The role of the Global Fund is to align financing, markets, partners around national strategies and leverage global scale where this can help. And this has worked. As President Mahama said, there has been extraordinary progress on fighting AIDS, TB, and malaria, in extending life expectancy, in reducing maternal and infant mortality. And this has been driven by local leadership, exercising real decision-making power, backed by external funding, but also backed by increasing domestic resources. But what's changed? What's changed and where the Accra reset is so important is both the ambition and the global context. The global context underscores the imperative to build greater self-reliance, reduce external dependency, and exercise sovereignty. Now, the Global Fund is the biggest provider of external funding on health to countries across the continent. And you might think that, because that's our job, we would be a bit resistant to countries in Africa saying, you're not going to need us as much. But actually, nothing could be further from the truth. We are excited and embracing the Accra reset because we see this as an opportunity to work together to accelerate progress on health and accelerate the path to self-reliance. And we are revamping and changing a whole set of our policies and the way we work with countries to help make this happen. There are going to be challenges. This isn't a sort of slam dunk thing. There are executional challenges as we work on this together. And I just highlight three that I think that together we need to surmount. One is that as we accelerate the pathway to sovereign leadership and sovereign execution, we don't inadvertently lose the benefits of global scale. We've got to keep those benefits at the same time as having sovereign leadership. Second, that as we make this transition in an accelerated pathway, we don't disrupt progress against the key diseases that impact the health of people across Africa, or leave people behind. This is a pathway, it's not an easy switch, and it's one that actually different countries across the continent are in very different starting points on. And thirdly, we must ensure that this process isn't seen by donors as an excuse to yet further reduce their support for global health. Because while there are some countries in the continent that are well advanced on this and absolutely ready to seize sovereignty and to reduce their reliance on external funding sharply, there are other countries on the continent, particularly those racked by conflict, where saving lives and sustaining and improving the health of the people will require external support. So together we must make sure that, in a sense, this isn't misinterpreted by donors. So that's all I was going to say. You have had the Global Fund as a partner for 24 years. We will continue to be your partner until you do us out of a job, and we will celebrate when that day happens. Thank you.
Peter Sands, thank you very much. I think we can give Peter a round of applause, please. Thank you so much. Allow me now to welcome Dr. Sanya Nishta to kindly please join me on stage, Madam Priya Basu to join me as well. And Naveen, I'm going to invite you to come and sit with us, even though you're going to be taking on a listening posture with some reflective comments at the end. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It's going to be razor sharp and super tight because I know that we're out of time. But Dr. Sanya, perhaps let me start off with you because what's top of mind for me is the piece that was published in the Lancet yesterday that you had put together. And in that piece, you talk about, or you call for more sovereignty to be passed on to countries and for global health institutions to really focus on the things that should be done at the global level. Just unpack for us the framework and what you are proposing in a little bit more detail.
Well, thank you very much, and it's very humbling to be speaking in the presence of President John Mahama and His Excellency, the Prime Minister of Papua New Guinea. Actually, something very profound is happening in the world today, because on the one hand, there are a number of different regressive variables, and of course, amongst those regressive variables is a very sharp cutback on the official development assistance, and the imminent collapse of healthcare to the neediest populations in the world. So that's what we see on the one hand, and conflicts and climate change related problems. But on the other hand, something very transformative has happened. And we just heard an illustration of that when President Mahama spoke. Truly transformative, potentially transformative vision for the world. And we really thank you for that. I think that is going to, your speech is going to resonate for a very long time. And it actually has set a course forward for the future development framework. Now, within this framework, within this context, the Lancet paper was articulated for two reasons. Firstly, because within this changing landscape, international agencies have to recast themselves, have to reposition themselves, and have to be relevant to this new architecture, where governments want to take more responsibility, where governments want to be sovereign, and the parameters of that we just heard a moment ago. So we as an institute, as global health entities, have to adjust, adapt, recast ourselves. And in the global health landscape, we have to create a new global health ecosystem. And there are many conversations. There's a long list of initiatives that's currently underway. So the paper on the one hand outlines, number one, what is the objective of this exercise? What is the objective with respect to the Geneva ecosystem, the New York ecosystem? What is the objective of this exercise for the last mile? Are we talking about institutional mergers, structural solutions, or are we talking about changes at the last mile which will forge better coherence, translate into better delivery? And then the paper calls for the need for articulation of new principles, the clarity of objectives. It calls for a very clear process, and depending on the objective, then we ascertain which agencies are in scope and how to incrementally roll out that reform. And it calls for the creation of an independent panel, led politically, and I think some initial important steps have already been taken in that direction. And it calls for a standing committee of stakeholders like myself and Peter and Tedros, who are interested parties in this process. And we don't have to sit on the independent, we shouldn't sit on the independent panel, but we are interested parties. And then it calls for specific country arrangements, and we're calling for a merger at the last mile. And we think that's particularly important because if I put my hat of a former cabinet minister in the government of Pakistan, the most difficult thing that I had to deal with were the plethora of international agencies that want to operate. Each one of them wanted a different bank account. Each one of them wanted a different audit. They had different indicators to report on. Each one of them mobilized different missions, had different grant cycles. And there's significant potential to merge operations at the last mile, and there are vehicles and instruments to do that. So that's the one part of what the paper called for. And of course, lastly, in that first part, it also called for the need for a new risk appetite for organizations like us, and the need for new policy instruments, because we are now dealing with settings that are increasingly fragile. So the mechanisms and instruments that we had at one point in time are increasingly not relevant anymore. That's the one part of the paper, the need for clarity on objectives, process, what's in scope, and the need for new instruments. The second part of the paper actually reflects on the Gavi reform as it is playing out, and that reform is called the Gavi Leap. The Gavi Leap has actually been articulated, developed, and is currently being implemented in the context of the needed changes in the global health architecture. We have taken tangible steps to cede power to where it should belong, to countries. We've taken tangible steps to give decision-making discretion to countries on how Gavi resources should be deployed. We have simplified our processes in response to what I heard from the ground. When I was a new CEO 2 years ago, my first trip was to Africa. And I listened to leaders, I listened to health administrators, I listened to community health workers at the last mile. And what they consistently told me was that we really value Gavi. Yeah. It brings value to our people, to our healthcare system, to our children, but your processes are onerous. And so learning from that, we've radically simplified our processes. We end-to-end digitized our grant-making system to create the transparency. So that is, in summary, that is actually the sum of the paper, some parameters for the broader rethink, and then sharing some of the learnings from the Gavi reform that is currently playing out.
Dr. Sanya, I think what's really encouraging as we listen to you is the intentionality, to quote you, to cede power
where it should be, and that is within the sovereign state and within the government. You also make some interesting comments that I think many will follow up on around the idea of merging at the last mile point, which is quite important because it reduces the noise around the systems that we often say are weak. Let me build on that by coming to Priya, because Priya, one of the things we need to figure out in this conversation and in this reset is how do we then deploy capital in such a way that it creates or expands space for sovereignty without creating more financial dependencies or establishing new relationships of dependency.
Well, thank you very much, and Your Excellencies. It's really a privilege to be here in this room, and really inspired by all the speeches and calls that came in the lead up to this panel. I just want to make a couple of points. Firstly, that health security is national security, and national security is global security. And we cannot get health security without self-reliance. And so, the entire Accra reset, the calls for sovereignty and self-reliance are absolutely critical to achieving health security and global security. The pandemic fund, we are new. We're only 3 years old. We are born out of lessons from the COVID pandemic. But we're also born out of lessons learned from decades of development finance and how aid is done. And so, the model is very much centered on country demand, country choices, country plans, on country commitments, their own financing, their own investment. So, to answer your question, and your question really gets to the heart of what needs to be done. What's really needed, and we've heard this before, we've heard this during this afternoon, we really need a paradigm shift in the way aid is done and in the way in which global health financing is delivered. And this paradigm shift is all about putting countries at the center, about delivering financing to countries when it comes to international finance, delivering that financing to countries on budget in a way that's really aligned with what their own national plans require. And it's about sort of coordinating and collaborating, bringing partners together so that funding is provided in an aligned manner. The scarce international financing that there is provided in an aligned manner in a way that really catalyzes countries to put their own resources. So once again, I just want to say that at the Pandemic Fund, we are fully committed to supporting the Accra reset. Already, we have a $7 billion portfolio thanks to our catalytic financing nature, and 50% of our portfolio is in Africa.
Yeah.
And we're looking forward to growing that portfolio, but also to working with Africa in a way that, again, as Peter said before me, puts us eventually out of business, because that is success for us. When Africa is kind of financing its own health needs, then that is when we can really declare victory and, step away. So thank you again.
Thank you so much, Priya. Definitely deserves a round of applause. Naveen, I'm hearing so many people trying to negotiate themselves out of jobs in this conversation. But I've explicitly asked you to come onto the panel without a question that's been prepared for you, and to say that as you listen into the comments made by Peter, as you listen into Dr. Sanya, listen to Priya, reflectively, what stands out to you as the opportunity to act that will really make us see health translate into national health, as we've heard, but also into sovereign health as well?
Thank you. I am going to, in the interest of time, limit my comments to 3 points. First, I want to talk about the role of philanthropy, and then talk about what we have done till now and make sure I end up on what is the future for Accra Reset. I represent philanthropy, I represent the Rockefeller Foundation, and the philanthropy can basically do 3 things that are unique and to its whole industry. First, we can take risks. We can go where private sector and government cannot go. Second, we bring our own financing, so we're independent in our thought process. And finally, more important, we can convene different partners. We can set the table where normally partners who don't talk to each other can come in a trusted format. So that is what we've done. We've helped set up and start the journey of the Accra Reset. By the way, the vision of the Accra Reset is global, and we want to make sure that the journey towards sovereignty is fulfilled. And I actually had to go look up the definition of sovereignty because I wanted to make sure I clearly understood what it meant. And my understanding today is that it means the ability of a country to regulate and to govern itself without external interference. And that is a noble cause. So what is next? We're trying, in addition to bringing some stability, some structure like the Secretariat, the college, the councils, we are now going to convene a community of practice where we bring the Accra Reset countries together to define the problems and, more importantly, to come up with the solutions. And just to echo President Mahama's closing comment, we want to move Accra Reset from a think tank to a do tank.
Thank you very much. From a think tank to a do tank, I think it's a great place to end the conversation. Allow me to thank you very much for your time. We are proceeding towards the tail end of our program. Thank you very much, Dr. Sanya. Thank you, Priya. Thank you, Naveen. Thank you. Now, one of the panels that was reconfigured was the panel on how do we move from concepts and strategies to joint